Hello and welcome to another episode of Behind the Podcast, the show where we talk to your favorite podcast hosts. I, of course, am Adamo Barbieri, your host for the evening and this series, I guess, unless they fire me. And I'd be okay with that. I mean, I'd understand. You know, I'm an understanding guy. But anyways, we're on getvocal.com, of course, and we're live streaming on Facebook, Periscope, YouTube. But if you're watching those live streams, click the link. Join us on getvocal.com or even get the app. It's so much fun. This platform is made for the audience to engage and interact with us. And just feel free to, if you have a question, put it in the chat bar or even grab a spot, cam up and join the conversation. It doesn't even have to be a question, an opinion. Just come talk to us. We're lonely people. We want to talk to you. Today we have an amazing lineup, two amazing guests. We're talking all about romance novels. Today we have Sarah Wendell from the Smart Podcast Trashy Books. The Smart Podcast Trashy Books podcast. Mouthful there. And Melody from the Heaving Bosoms podcast. Guys, cam up and let's get going here. Sarah, I fumbled that one. I apologize.
That's okay. No worries.
Too many podcast words in there.
Hey, Melody.
Hi.
Guys, thank you
Great
so
to
much for
see
joining us. I'm so happy that you're here, and I'm excited to talk to you.
Yeah, same here. I'm honored.
Guys,
Thank you for having us. We actually just spoke on, was it Sunday? Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
When Melody and Aaron were a guest on my show. So we're talking all week. So we're just going to continue talking to each other probably in perpetuity.
Let's keep that rolling.
I'm pretty stoked about it.
Yeah, it's really great, right?
Guys, I want to get right into it. When did you realize you had this passion for romance novels, and when did that all start for you? And we'll start with Sarah, and then we can go to Melody.
I was introduced to romance in high school, and I often say that romance is pretty much a literary inheritance, either deliberately or through some form of large. Most of us who enter romance as readers are either given a book by someone who's close to us, or we steal a book from someone who is close to us, or we sneak the book that we shouldn't be reading from someone who is reading it that doesn't want us to read it and hid it and found it anyway. So my first romance that I read was in high school. I had gotten it into my head that I wasn't very smart because I was a delayed reader. And I came across another student from my high school who was reading a paperback that was, really, if you've ever seen single title historical romances in the 90s, they were quite large. Yeah. And I was like, oh, clearly she's very smart. She's reading this, really big book. And I asked her what it was about. And I don't think she breathed in for about 6 minutes while she told me every detail about the book she was reading. Introduced me to every romance in the library shelves. We were in the library at the time. And then she got up to use the bathroom, and I started reading her book. And then I checked it out and left the library before she left the ladies' room. So I stole her book.
That's amazing.
Yeah, true story. I still feel bad. I can feel myself turning red right now.
I think enough time has passed where you can let that go, I think.
I don't know. Is there ever really a statute of limitations on stealing another person's book? Like that's yeah. Melody's
Sarah and Cheryl, like we're fine.
Yeah.
Melody, how about you, Melody? When did this all start for you?
So actually, I stumbled into romance because my mom took me to a Christian bookstore. It was at a time where she was like, I think that we've moved to this new area. Everybody here is Christian. We're going to do it too. Yeah. So I was like, sure, let's go. And we stumble into this Christian bookstore, and true to form, instead of picking up a Bible or some other very religious text, I picked up some sort of historical Christian fiction. It was called Monday's Child by Linda Chaikin. And it was a romance. It's amazing. I actually think we should read it again because I think my current self would hate it. But is so good. It had like a Nazi subplot, and it had like, there was these stolen goods from whatever. And since it was romance, but there was just like a very chaste kiss at the end. So it wasn't like scandalous at that point. And I kind of snuck under the radar with my mom. And so she was like, "Oh, great. You're reading this good, wholesome stuff." And at that point it was, but it was one of those starter drugs,
Oh,
Yeah,
I
it was a
see.
gateway drug.
It was a gateway, yeah.
Gateway drug,
Yeah.
yeah.
There
Yeah,
it is.
it's like the scene in Sweet Valley High where Bruce Patman puts his hand on Elizabeth Wakefield's breast, and if you're in high school, you're like, "Oh my God, that's a thing that happens to people." Oh my, yeah, and then that's just downhill from there.
Yeah. Or uphill, really. Just
Or uphill,
shoot the universe.
Right.
Yeah.
You make a good point.
Guys, what I ask everyone on this show is, why podcasting? What made you, what drew you to podcasting? I know you guys actually now have a really active community of listeners and blogs and on social media, but how did podcasting come into play, and why was that such a good marriage?
Oh, our first episodes were in 2009 because I always wanted my own radio show. I thought the radio was the coolest thing. I always wanted to have my own radio show, and I never had a chance to get into broadcasting. Like, here's this opportunity to have my own radio show. Who's going to stop me? It's the internet. No one's going to stop me. So I was actually telling Melody and Aaron on Sunday, I read Podcasting for Dummies on a drive home from seeing my in-laws. And I was like, no, I can totally do this. I can totally do this. I needed help for the first few episodes. And then I went offline and taught myself how to do it and brought the show back in 2011. And I've been doing episodes ever since.
Wow.
I love having my own show. I love the idea. And I think this is true of the internet in general, that no matter what random thing you're curious about or interested in, there is totally at least 15 to 25 other people who are interested in that same thing. And it's always the episodes where I'm like, no one's going to like this but me. This is going to be like the weirdest episode. No one's going to care about this. And then I get email like, that changed my life.
Oh man, it resonates. Yeah.
Best feeling.
How about you, Melody?
That's awesome. Well, let me see. So I have a background in competitive public speaking, as does my best friend and co-host of the show. So we actually met through competitive public speaking. We were coaches for a team after graduating from college. And so performance and communication and everything has always been like a very, like a cornerstone of my life. And when we no longer did speech, Aaron and I wanted to talk more frequently. And so we'd batted around the idea of like having a shared project that would force us to talk to each other. And then that became a podcast because we both like talking and we both, like telling jokes and we like, riffing off each other and everything. And then from there, it just became, what do we think we could talk about for years, like what interests do we both have that we can use? So, the podcast was born.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So from day one up until now, what are like, do you have a goal for episode to episode? And has that goal changed from like the conception of the podcast to now?
Goal for
your for each episode and for the podcast in general. So like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, how do you break down each episode? What do you consider a successful episode? And has your goal for the whole podcast changed from day one up until now?
Ooh, Sarah, I'm so excited to hear your answer to this.
No,
Melody, you're first.
Mean, because I was about to be like, Melody, why don't you go first?
I can tell you mine. I'm just really interested in what yours is because so one of the biggest things about the podcast for me was my co-host is a full-time lawyer. I have a full-time job. I also have kids. Like, we have very busy lives. And so the biggest thing for me was like, I am going to have a really hard time if I'm responsible for coming up with content every week. Like if I have to like write something or whatever, this is going to be a big barrier. And so our goal, because each week we do a deep breakdown of a romance novel that we've both read, and we essentially recap it for the audience. We're not reviewers. You will find out what we think about the book throughout the episode, but we're not like professional reviewers. So honestly, our goal, my goal for each episode is to be funny. Like, it's just, and it's not really even a goal. It's just something that kind of happens between Aaron and I because we think the other one is funny. So that's mostly it. That and another one of my goals, like a more serious goal, is to try to bring out the best in whatever the novel is, because writing books is incredibly hard, and that's the reason I don't do it. You know, these women, generally women, are behind the books, even if it has a male author in our genre. And so you know, these women are wizards. They're incredible. They're so smart and they're so hardworking. And so even if it's a book I don't like, one of my goals is to make sure people will come away with a nugget of like, the reason I don't like it is because of me, or I think you will like it if you like this, you know, like, so even if it's an episode where we don't necessarily like the book, I still want people to see what I think is the best about it.
Interesting.
So
Sarah, how about you?
I love the sort of best friends book club format of Heaving Bosoms. I think it is so great. My show is a little bit different in that usually it's me hosting and producing it. So I go and interview different guests. Sometimes I have the writers for my site, like Amanda or Elise or Carrie, or some of our new writers join me to talk about whatever they're reading. What Are You Reading is an automatic 4.5 hour, possibly month conversation.
Easily.
Yeah, right. You ask another romance reader, what are you reading? And you hit record.
That's going to be my next question. That's my next question.
Oh,
buckle up.
No, we won't get into that just yet.
I know.
How much time do you have?
We have all night.
Much like I said a minute ago, whatever random thing I'm interested in, I know at least 2 other people are going to be interested in it. And the thing about romance is that the people who read and write and produce romance are not just looking at the courtship narrative that is in the book. Because romances are about intimacy and about self-actualization and autonomy and agency, that information and those themes lend themselves to so many other topics. So I have spoken to Emily and Amelia Nagoski about the stress cycle in women, and I've spoken to gynecologists and sociologists, and I've spoken to romance authors, and publicists are so fun to talk to because they are book nerds like us and they just geek out about books. And I also have interviews with, Chuck Tingle, which was the strangest experience I've had on the podcast. So
let's talk about that. Who is
love Chuck Tingle.
I know, it was the most amazing thing. Okay. All right.
We don't know. The answer is we don't know.
You don't know who Chuck Tingle
Nobody
is?
knows who Chuck Tingle is.
Chuck Tingle is
an
an
enigma.
He is a mystery wrapped in an enigma, and no one is really sure who he is. But I am trying to find his most recent book. I believe not pounded at the last second, because consent can be given and revoked at any moment, and that is an important thing that's important to understand from 2-time Hugo Award finalist.
That's correct. Okay, so here's the thing. Chuck Tingle is this absolutely brilliant not satirist, I don't think. But all of his books follow a very, very specific formula. It's usually male gay romance. And it's usually like the most banana town bonkers scenario you could ever come up with. And then it's to like the nth degree. Like we have done some episodes on, we did Bigfoot. Oh, shoot. We did the lawyer, God bless America. It's pounded in the butt by a Bigfoot lawyer doctor. God damn it. Anyway.
And there's like pounded by the pound, pounded in the butt by my book, pounded in the butt by my own butt.
He has a podcast. It's called Pounded in the Butt by My Own Podcast. It's incredible.
He is a walking piece of art in performance.
We don't know who Chuck Tingle is, though. We don't know what he looks like.
No.
Nothing.
Anytime he's been filmed, he's been like wrapped and concealed. And When I did the interview, he called me on a restricted number, and
Yes.
I still don't know like who I was talking to, and
He masked
I
his
felt really
voice.
bad.
It's so
I felt
good.
I felt
sounds
really
like-
bad for the transcriptionist because I'm sure she was like, "What is happening right now?"
I'm sorry. I just got a correction from a really good
Let's do
listener, and that is
It's like,
him.
"Doctor,
Seduced by Dr. Bigfoot, attorney at large. There's also there's a Bitcoin in my butt, and he is handsome.
pounded in the butt by my handsome fidget spinner."
Yes.
Was one of my.
Oh, so he's
favorites.
topical too, eh?
Oh,
He's just,
very
he's with the
current event,
trends.
very
Yeah.
topical.
What?
Oh
Yes.
yeah,
Thank you, Natalie.
He sounds like
yes,
you guys-
Natalie, we owe you one.
he sounds like he's Banksy. You know Banksy, the graffiti artist that no one really knows.
He's like the Banksy of being pounded in the butt by
Yeah.
random things.
Amazing. So speaking of being pounded in the butt, porn versus romance novels. Now, can we talk about the big difference in the debate? Because I feel like a lot of people who aren't not that it is a debate, but I feel like people who aren't well versed with romance novels, mainly men, I guess, in relationships who don't understand why their partner is into it, they would say it's like it's a porn for women. But is it porn? What's the biggest difference between? Because I feel like
So-
women like porn too. I mean,
So
I don't
here's the
know.
thing, right? That's one of my it's one of my least favorite statements, and it's usually, you're correct, that's the stereotype of romance
Yeah.
novels. It's like it's lady porn, right? And my first counter argument is porn is lady porn. Like, just
Thank you. Porn is porn
women
for women.
watch porn, guys. It's totally cool. It's fine.
Yeah, it's great.
And then the other thing is, I want people to, there is absolutely a sexual element, and there's romance that comes with, like I said, my first one was a very chaste kiss. And then you've got, Banana Town bonkers, alien porn, like sex scenes and all that, erotica. But the biggest thing about romance novels is that it's an adventure story with a woman at the center of it. So any of your spy stories or whatever, usually those are male protagonists, and it's just as much of an escape. It's just as much of a, self-actualization, as Sarah said earlier. But romance is, not only does it center a woman, but it also elevates the interior experience. It elevates what's going on in your mind and your heart, and the obstacles that you're overcoming in order to be with someone else or not be with someone else, or you know what I mean? So those are my two answers. Sarah, what do you think?
It has been so long since I've answered this question. I actually had to sit and think for a minute. Like, wow, okay, going back to the porn question. I haven't heard the porn question in so long.
And
It's like being visited by a relative. I don't want to see it all.
I apologize.
You're fine.
That's all
you're
right.
fine.
I'm like, wow. Like it's almost like looking back at your first romance and being like, wow, so much has changed since the 90s. And I looked at the cover of the one you read, by the way, Melody. Some outstanding soft focus Vaseline light cover art right there.
Oh.
Yeah. Romance often gets accused of being mostly for titillation and sexual enjoyment.
Mhm.
And, it's kind of amazing that there are books that can turn your crank, but it's not just romance that does that.
Correct.
Moreover, there's plenty of things to accuse romance of. Most of it is wrong, unfortunately. The thing about romance is that it is, like Melody said, centering women. And for a lot of people who don't understand the genre, that is very scary indeed. But it's just like reading fantasy or science fiction or mystery. In a mystery, you need to solve the crime or people will be pissed.
Correct.
In romance, it's happily ever after or people will be pissed. It's very much the same sort of genre construct. It's not porn, alas. However, if you would like it to be, that is also okay.
That's true. I guess
Absolutely.
anything could be porn if it gets you off, right?
Yeah, if you
I mean,
go,
we just talked about being pounded in the butt by a fidget spinner. Come on now.
that's right. I mean, there is somebody out there that does it for them, and
Yeah.
I'm into,
More
good.
power to
That's
them.
excellent. Yeah. But there are romances, and then there's also, you can go to fan fiction sites and click on the subtitle that says it's called one-handed reading. because it's erotica.
Okay.
You need your other hand for something else.
Yeah.
That is not necessarily a romance, right? Because erotica doesn't have to have a happy ending. It does have a sexual element.
Story.
Whereas, whereas romance needs to have the courtship and the happy ending, and then it can have some sexy times if you want it to.
Or it could just really, really intense hand holding. I've read some of that.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Can't
Maybe their fingertips touch because, there's a lot of boundaries. Yep.
I want to talk about the effect that these novels have on the reader. Do they really affect how one can perceive their real life relationship? I mean, does it, like reading these books, do they, I don't know, maybe it's blown out of proportion and they look at their real relationship. They're like, why isn't it like this in the book? Why isn't my life like this book right now? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Are you asking if they give unrealistic expectations?
I think that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Fair.
So no, unless it's unrealistic to expect partners to provide you with respect and orgasms. No, it's not unrealistic at all.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, is it unrealistic when you read a sci-fi that doesn't have romantic elements? Right? There's always realism in fiction. It is fiction, right? But there are human elements in every piece of fiction. At least I hope so. Otherwise, I probably won't want to read it.
Mm-hmm.
My other thing is it's really healthy to read romance, especially as you're growing up, because it's an incredibly safe way to figure out what works for you and what doesn't. There is no physical content. There's no, contact. There's no, if a character runs into an unsafe situation, you can sort of go through your brain and be like, what would I do if I was in that unsafe situation? What should we do? Reading romance, especially as a teen, lets you know whether you're into like an asshole alpha or, like a sweet cinnamon roll beta. It's a really cool way to explore yourself and what you want, instead of attempting to do that where the stakes are much, much higher.
Mm-hmm.
That, and since usually, women are the center of it, it's especially important, I think, for young hetero boys to read romance, because I would like my son personally to have those standards for himself and for his partner. I don't think it's like she said, I don't think it's unrealistic to want a partner that respects you and gives you a metric fuck ton of orgasms. I think that should just be the standard. And then you can go above if you want to, right?
Yeah.
But
I just think sometimes maybe it can be portrayed as like this marathon of sexual, activity. And realistically, maybe it's a sprint for some people, not a marathon.
I've read that book, but it's not as if they were not on Earth. So I wasn't that worried,
Well, not to mention that romances, there are second chance romances and things like that where the protagonist might already be married and they're like refinding each other or something.
Mm-hmm.
But the majority of romance is set in the beginning of a relationship, right? And if you look at what we have on most of our reality TV screens, a lot of it is the same beginning of a relationship, I mean, I just started watching Bachelor in Paradise and it's a good time this year, you guys. But it doesn't necessarily, it's not that that romance, it's not like a sprint or a marathon, right? It's just that it usually has the beginning of the relationship and then the happily ever after you sort of imagine, or you might get a little bit more in the epilogue.
Mm-hmm.
But that, if you think about it, once people get married or whatever, a lot of people look at that as an accomplishment. And then we talk about it as like, they're done, right? They're settled. That's a cultural thing. That's not a romance only thing.
Oh, well said, actually. It's very interesting. Sarah, do you have something to say? It looks like you're thinking about something. No,
go ahead.
Guys, we're on getvocal.com. We're live. We're also live streaming on Facebook, Periscope, and YouTube. But join us here on getvocal.com. Join us in this chat room. We're going to take down this extra thing here. Grab a spot, cam up, ask us any questions, or just share your opinions with us. We're dying to hear it. please join us, guys.
And you can ask us for book recommendations too. We're real good at that.
Yeah, we'll get into
yeah.
that too. We're going to get into what you're reading and what you look for in a book. But before we do that, we were just talking about like relationships and marriage. And I was curious what your partners think about your passion for the romance novels, and if they're supportive, and if did it take some time to coming around to understanding that?
Not ever.
No.
I met my husband in high school. So we've been together for almost 25 years. We're married 20 years next year.
Oh,
Congratulations. If we could hear an audience right now, everyone would be clapping.
You don't have to clap. It's actually pretty nauseating to meet your husband in high school. And I'm fully aware of that. But no, this is the website and the podcast are my full-time job. I am an entrepreneur and I have been since 2010. So there is nothing but pride and admiration in all corners here. Moreover, I feel like I need to sort of tilt your frame a little bit. There's nothing shameful about reading romance. Yeah. And I understand there's a lot of messaging that says, oh, you should be ashamed of that. First of all, I received those messages for so long, and I also internalized them. And it takes a while to come out of that messaging that there's something wrong with you for reading romance. There's something wrong with you for liking these books. But the truth is, romance is actually about courtship and intimacy. And as Nora Roberts once said, that they're a hat trick of easy targets because they're about intimacy, relationships, and sex. It's really easy to make fun of that. But I don't know anybody who's like, good orgasms and a good relationship. Who wants that? That sounds terrible. Nobody wants that.
You should be ashamed.
Right? Yeah. God. Autonomy and respect, and someone who treats you as a person and an equal and a partner. Oh, gross. Who wants that garbage? That's the goal, I think, of what we want out of the romance genre. And when we as readers make demands of the books that we're reading, and we want the genre to be better, or we want a book to be better, because I do review all the time and I have a lot of strong opinions about the books I read. Every time I want it to be a better book and a better experience for the next time someone picks up a book and says, oh, this, and then they really discover, oh no, this is pretty great. You should read more of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and my husband, let me see. Well, he's sort of gone through the gamut with me, I guess, because I was reading the Outlander series for a while. And I think this was before, my like period of enlightenment or whatever about what I like and everything, because for a while there were a lot of years where I sort of just wasn't reading, because since I did competitive public speaking, I did so much reading for that I didn't have time to like actually read books I liked. It was all plays and poetry and stuff that I could incorporate into performances. So for him, when he saw me reading the Outlander series, he kept on, I don't remember what he would say, but he was like, oh yeah, what's that book about? And so I was explaining it and I was like, it's historical fiction, but it's got this like sci-fi kind of going back in time element. And like, there's this cool relationship and they just did some sexing up of each other. And so then he started saying something about, like, oh, is that your sex book? And I would be like, it's historical fiction. So we just sort of like, I don't know. I make fun of him about what a nerd he is about baseball and stuff like that. We just have sort of a playful relationship about it. So he tells everybody, about my podcast. Yeah.
Well, I think it's great,
right?
Yeah.
I think you guys have such a great sense of humor, and it comes out in your episodes. And I was just curious as to, I mean, a lot of people have misconceptions about this genre. So that's amazing. I love that you guys make light of everything along the way, and you poke fun, but you do love it.
Oh, very much.
Yeah.
Very, very much.
Well, and I actually have listeners who just posted in our social media. We have like a closed group and stuff, and one of our listeners just said, I just had a quote unquote, like really good date with my husband. And it was after reading this incredible book by this author. And I'm so glad that I know about this book because boy, oh boy, has it improved my relationship of late. So like, I think if anything, significant others should be stoked about the fact that really. Romance.
I want to talk about romance novels and maybe like gender roles. And I feel like our humanity, like as we know, like the last 20 years, we've evolved a lot. And there's a lot more, we know a lot more about sexual orientation. And I feel like romance novels, are they ahead of the curve? Are they with the times? Are there romance novels for these different sexual orientations? I feel like, Sarah, I think I read something about asexual romance novels that you covered. If we can just talk about that, because I think that's amazing of how broad the spectrum is, and there's something for everyone.
Yes. So the answer is yes and no.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
For equivocation, right? It's both.
Right.
Oddly enough. There are romance novels that explore so many different kinds of sexuality now because people are finding the way to publish the stories that they want to read.
Right.
Because the barriers towards publication have broken way down. And if you're looking for a trans romance, asexual, pansexual, demisexual, polyamorous, name something, I can probably find you at least 6 books and know that 3 of them are excellent.
Yeah.
There are lesbian romances. There are many, many gay romances. There are so many different types of sexualities and also cultures that are represented in romance. However, if you take all of the books and you smush them into one big world, that world is still pretty white, straight, Christian, heterosexual, cisgendered, and Christian. So the genre needs to grow, and the genre needs to better represent the people that read it and write it. And it's not just women that read it and write it, although when you go to a romance conference like Romance Writers of America was in New York a couple of weeks ago, it is still mostly women who write it, read it, and also produce it. The people who work inside publishing houses in romance are often also women, but it is not just women, and it is not people who just identify as women. There are all sorts of identified people in the genre who love it as much as we do.
Yeah.
So yes, there are books for whatever you are looking for. Yes, the genre needs to grow and include more people to better represent the people who love it so much.
Absolutely. Yep.
Both.
Yep.
Well, they are.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in like romance Twitter or whatever, there's the hashtag own voices, because I think that's another really important part of it. Any person can write any book, but it's really, I think, important to have people who come from that perspective. It's important to publish trans authors who are writing trans books. It's important to have representation that is true to actual humans, as well as, people writing, I guess, a little bit, not more imaginatively, but writing
from the outside in.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. So I think that, that they're working on it, a lot more. And then it's also the burden of fans and podcasts like ours and everything like that to show that there is more interest in that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. One of the things that I talk a lot about is religious inclusivity, because I'm Jewish, and I self-published a Hanukkah romance in 2014 because I wanted one and there wasn't one. So I wrote it. And it was all my catnip. Totally still works on me. I've bad decision to book club my own book, which is so embarrassing, but it's like 1 a.m. I'm like, I wrote this and I'm staying too late up at night to read it. It's really nice. It's a true story though. When it works, it works.
That's right.
So I have talked to readers who want more Muslim romance, who want more romance representing different faiths and different cultures. And there are so many different religious institutions just around me. I want more romances that center that culture for those readers as well. So that's sort of my lane. The nice thing about staying in your lane is that eventually you come to an intersection, and then you can work with other people to make everything better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Beep, beep.
So when you guys are covering books, do you feel responsible to I guess pick certain books that represent try to get more of a broad? How do you go about picking your books?
Well, since we started this podcast, approximately 14 million books have been published, so it's hard.
Yeah, I bet.
Like literally 14 million since we started talking have been published, probably. Maybe 50. I could be wrong. Part of the balance, I think, if you are writing about romance, if you're podcasting about romance, if you're trying to build a list about romance, is to not only look at what is much anticipated and very, very popular, but also look at what is new that you might not have ever seen before.
Yeah.
And that could be any number of things. Like I just read a book called Spellbound by, I want to say Ali Theron. And I know the last name is Theron. Miss Theron, if I have screwed up your name, I apologize. But
she's in the chat. She's in the chat room right now.
yeah, she's like, what did you do? So in Spellbound, it is a male-male romance set in the 20s in New York City, where one of the characters has, I believe it's called psychometry, where he can touch something and see its history. And there are other paranormal creatures. So you have paranormal elements, you have magic, you have historical, you have New York, and you have there's a gay character, a polyamorous character, a pansexual character. I mean, there's so many different things happening. And it was a blast. So I could look at that and say, okay, I know 10 different readers who are going to like this book for 25 different reasons. Are you writing that down, Melody?
Yes.
It's so delightful. Oh my gosh.
Yep. Excellent. Yeah. Well, and we pick our books. We actually, the majority of our list is like, I think 5 years long now, and it's majority recommendations from listeners. Mm-hmm. And then from there, we realized that we didn't have enough representation at all, because it was cis, hetero, white, usually historical, or just contemporary and historical. And so we were trying to get a lot more representation in there. So now we grab like 1 or 2 from the rec list, maybe 3 from the rec list, and then the other 2 slots in like our 5 episodes upcoming. We make sure to either get a writer of color or an LGBTQ character in